So like I said, we're in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is not a book that a lot of churches spend a whole lot of time in. Probably you could read from those first verses we read, you could probably understand why. They seem to lack a lot of hope, but the reality is within them, we see some of the big questions that people are asking, people of faith and people that are not of any particular faith. And so the message this morning we're going to look at is called, Does It Even Matter? Does it all even matter? So I'm going to read not the verses that we read. I'm going to read the second section we'll look at. This is Ecclesiastes 3, verses 16 through chapter 4, verse 3. The verses will be up behind me. You can grab a Bible on the table in front of you. There's a link on the front of our bulletin if you want to read it on your smartphone or iPad. You can do it there. So I'm going to read along, and this is a part wondering, where is justice? So this is Ecclesiastes 3:16. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies another. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? Again, I saw all the oppressors that are done under the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. This is the word of the Lord. Well, that's, again, not the most uplifting note in the word. So let's get a more uplifting start to this. I want to talk about the questions we all ask. I don't know if you're into the Olympics as much as I am, but I cannot get enough of watching the Olympics. I'm kind of crazy. I predict I will go into some sort of mini depression once the games are over. Like, I get up in the morning, I stick them on while I'm making breakfast for the kids and making coffee and things. And when I can focus on them while I'm doing work, I do. And then sometimes I take breaks from work. On Friday, as I was working on this message, I was in Starbucks and I had my computer here and I was typing, and then I had my iPad here set up watching the women's soccer game, which we lost. And so I'm in Starbucks, like doing this with my headphones on, and people look at me very strangely. But I love the Olympics. It is extremely fun. And, I think one of the reasons, even if you're not a big fan, you can kind of empathize with, one of the reasons it's so great is because you're seeing on TV when people succeed, you're seeing them fulfill their childhood dreams, right? Things that they have dreamt about for so long, they have been able to fulfill. And so a lot of times when that happens is when people win, they break down emotionally because it is such an overwhelming relief to win or to be at the top of your game. And so here's a few of the ones. There's Allie Raisman, who won the silver medal on, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. And then Simone Biles won the gold in gymnastics, both crying towards the end of their routines. There's one of the swimmers, I think, what was his name? Caleb Dressel, after winning one of the relays earlier on, crying on the medal stand, because it's such a release to fulfill your dreams and to do what you've been working almost your entire life for. While many of us might think about that and go, well, that'd be cool to fulfill our dreams, whatever they might be, we rarely get to see someone who has fulfilled their highest level competition dreams, and even more than they could ever dream, and yet they get to express to us that it's still not enough for what they're hoping for out of life. In 2005, on a 60 Minutes interview, Tom Brady, who is definitely one of the top 5 quarterbacks of all time, most likely, likely some would consider him the best of all time. I'm not a Patriots fan, so I don't, of course. At this point, though, in 2005, when this interview was done, he'd already won 3 Super Bowls. He's still extremely young, won 3 Super Bowls already, had more money than he knew what to do with. At that time, he was not married, so he could probably, in a lot of ways, almost marry any woman he wanted to. And yet, here's a short video about their interview, and what he says is extremely surprising, at least to many people. So we'll watch that short video, and then we'll continue.
Tom Brady, the quarterback of the New England Patriots, is not only one of the NFL's best players, he's one of the NFL's great stories. At the tender age of 30, he has already won 3 Super Bowls, an accomplishment that ranks him with some of the best quarterbacks ever to play the game. And he's having one of the greatest seasons in pro football history. When we first reported on him back in 2005, he seemed underrated and almost overlooked. He doesn't have the arm of Peyton Manning, and he doesn't have tattoos, and he doesn't take steroids, and he's never held out for more money. All he knows how to do is win. It's what you always wanted.
You're right. It has. And I didn't think it came with all the other baggage, though.
In addition to his success on the field and his sex appeal off it, there is also the $60 million 10-year contract to play with the Patriots.
I mean, I'm making more money now than I ever thought I could ever make playing football.
But with all that money, fame, and career accomplishments, we were surprised to hear this from him.
Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey, man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life is... Me, I think, God, it's got to be more than this.
What's the answer?
I wish I knew.
It's just an incredible moment of vulnerability in a lot of ways, isn't it? To hear someone who's really done more than they could ever do in their sport and see them say, there's got to be something else than this. It'd be interesting to do a follow-up on that interview to show that clip to Brady now, because that was 11 years ago. He's now married, in case you don't know, and has won another Super Bowl. He's won one more or 2 more? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, 1 more. So it'd be interesting to do a follow-up and see what he thought now. But still, it gets to the point that oftentimes what we think are our deepest dreams getting fulfilled, what we think will actually satisfy us in the end, is not what we actually need deep down in our souls and in our hearts. Getting everything we want sometimes might not be what we actually were made for. Solomon, King Solomon, who is most likely the author of Ecclesiastes, he was one of those people. He had everything he could ever want. He was one of the wisest people. He was the wisest person to ever live up to that point. He had all the money, all the wealth, all the peace and prosperity for his people that he could ever want, more women than he could ever need, as we saw last week. And yet he penned this book at the end of his life, Ecclesiastes, to say it wasn't enough. It didn't answer the deepest questions that ancient people like him were asking, and turns out it doesn't answer the deepest questions that we are asking today. Questions like this, and think about as you read this list, do you ever think about these things? Does life have any meaning? Why are we here? Does what we really do matter? Is history going anywhere? Is there any justice in the world? Is there anything beyond the grave? Why do things seem random and purposeless at times? Will anything satisfy the ache and the longing at the deepest level of our hearts? Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon in his old age to give voice to those questions and longings that people feel. And the book doesn't even necessarily point to the answers to those questions. Often it asks those questions and gives voice to them and leaves us longing for, well, what is the solution if this is reality? Thankfully, we have the rest of the scriptures to point us to where that answer is. A phrase you'll see again and again if you read through the book, it's about 12 chapters. Solomon uses the phrase under the sun 32 times in the book. And it's a theme that's woven throughout, and it's a clue to the ultimate answer When we look under the sun, we can't find an answer to what we truly need. It must be then somewhere that's not on earth. So let's wrestle together with these questions with Solomon, and then we'll try to see if we can find some answer to them by the end. And we have to, if you're gonna, when you read the Bible, I'm just saying a lot of things here. When you read the Bible and it says something that you might not particularly expect or may seem different than your experience, or whoa, that seems intense or more than I can handle, we have to spend some time going, why is the author expressing this? We have to in some ways kind of reflect on why does he feel that way, so we can really get the true depth of the answer that they offer, even if it's sometimes hard. So we start out, we read those first 11 verses. Jason read them for us at the start of the book. And the essential question at the beginning is, does life have any meaning at all? If you are an optimist at the beginning of this book, your reaction, this book is probably really hard for you. If you're just kind of naturally peppy and optimistic about life, you think everything is kind of rosy, you're going to read Ecclesiastes, and especially the beginning here, and go, yeah, can someone like get an antidepressant for Solomon here? Like this guy needs help. Like someone come along and help him out. Like he's really bummed out. So this might be, if you're more optimistic, bear with the people who are more melancholy and pessimistic. If you're kind of more like that, or if you've ever been in a place in life where you're desperate or you feel hopeless or you're in such a tough place with whatever you're going through, that these questions, they may actually seem like medicine to your soul, because finally someone is giving voice to what you've felt and what you are going through. Either way, these words, we believe, are inspired by the Holy Spirit of God. They are inspired. They are, in a sense, out of, though they're coming from Solomon's pen, they are out of God's mouth. And if that's true, what it's expressing and the point it's getting to is good for us in the end. So Solomon does what is called lamenting, and we don't do that too much in a lot of churches nowadays. We're supposed to be happy and everything's supposed to be rosy sometimes, but he is lamenting, and sometimes that's the most godly thing to do. So look with me at what he expresses. I'll just kind of go through it a little bit point by point. He essentially is asking, is everything meaningless? And here's how he says it. So he says, the words of the preacher, it starts out, vanity of vanities, or your version might say meaningless, meaningless. Everything is, all is vanity, or everything is meaningless. So Solomon observes, people come and go every day, and it seems like nothing really changes in the world. Every time we think we've progressed, he expresses, it seems something goes wrong. Everything seems vain and meaningless. You see verse 3, what does a man gain by all the toil, by all the hard work that we do under the sun? And then he observes verse 5, the sun rises, the sun goes down. Look, nothing changes. Just every day, the sun comes up, sun goes down. We still have the same injustice, the same trouble, the same problems. Verse 6, the wind blows to the south, goes around to the north, around and around goes the wind. Nature just seems like it's progressing day after day, again and again, and nothing is getting accomplished in our lives. He continues in verse 7, and he says in verse 8, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. He's expressing no one ever gets enough. Nothing ever seems like enough. No one is really satisfied. Verse 9, this is one of the most famous parts of the Bible. You may have heard before. It says, there is nothing new under the sun. There's nothing really new. There's nothing really that changes in the world. No one, this is a sobering thought, but look at verse 11. It says, there's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. What's he saying? You know how we look at people 100 years ago and we think, man, they're kind of backwards. 1900. Do you see how they treated women back then? Oof. You see the racial tension that happened back then? Just terrible. The way we think about people 100 years ago is the way in 100 years people will think about us. And then think about how we think about people in the Middle Ages 1,000 years ago. And oh my gosh, they pillaged and murdered, I don't know, whatever comes to your mind for people in the Middle Ages. What they did, savage people, violence, things. In 1,000 years from now, people will look back on us in 2016 and go, oh my gosh, what was wrong with them? That's what Solomon's saying. No one will remember us. No one will think we're great. No one will think we were better than everyone else. Now, it may seem very bleak, but think about this. If there, and this may have been what Solomon was somewhat expressing, if there is no God in the universe, if, you're a secularist, or if the secularists are right, someone who says essentially there's nothing beyond the material world, there's nothing spiritual, there's no higher power, no God, then essentially, if everything's just random chance, if it's just atoms floating around, colliding, if the universe is really the main moral of the universe is survival of the fittest, then the author here, Solomon, is right. Everything ultimately doesn't have any meaning. Everything is meaningless. It all just goes and comes, and nothing is really the big point of the story that we are all living in. Some of you may be familiar with C.S. Lewis. He was a famous Oxford professor and author who late in his life became a follower of Jesus. Here's what he said. This was over 60 years ago. He wrote this about the secularist worldview. He says, the universe, if that's true, if the secularists are right, the universe is a universe of nonsense. But since you are here, you better grab what you can. Unfortunately, however, there is, on these terms, very little left to grab. Only the coarsest sensual pleasures. You can't expect in the lowest animal sense, be in love with a girl if you know and keep on remembering that all the beauties, both of her person and of her character, are momentary and accidental pattern produced by the collision of atoms, and that your own response to them is only a sort of psychic phosphorescence arising from the behavior of your genes. You can't go on getting any serious pleasure from music if you know and remember that its air of significance is pure illusion, that you like it only because your nervous system is irrationally conditioned to like it. You may still, in the lowest sense, have a good time, but just insofar as it becomes very good, just insofar as it ever threatens to push you on from cold sensuality into real warmth and enthusiasm and joy, so far you will be forced to feel the hopeless disharmony between your own emotions and the universe in which you really live. He's essentially saying, if there is no God, if there is no higher power, then everything you feel about love, everything you feel about music or being moved by a story. We were just talking about Stranger Things this morning on Netflix and how, it's so good. All that is just random collision of nervous system in your brain, and it really has no meaning and purpose. Modern day Christian philosopher William Lane Craig put it this way. What is true of the universe and of the human race is also true of us as individuals. If God does not exist, then you are just a miscarriage of nature, thrust into purposeless universe to live a purposeless life. When Solomon observed the world, this is what he was saying it feels like. When he looks at what's going on, it feels like everything is meaningless. So does life even matter at all? Solomon says. Continuing on, the verses we looked at earlier in chapter 3, he asks another question. Is there any justice in the world? Is there any justice? So often most of us, I would wager, are taught that the world works and our society works, that if you're a good person, if you do good things, then good things will happen to you in response. If you're a bad person, you do bad things will happen to you, and you will have a bad life. And on a macro level, that works too. If we're a good country and we have good things will come to our country. If we're a bad country, do bad things, injustice, bad things will happen to us. A lot of people have kind of a pop culture view of karma today. You kind of hear it all the time, even from non-spiritual people. It's like, well, that'd be bad karma if I did that bad thing to someone, and then bad things will happen to me. But I want to do good karma so that good things will happen to me. We kind of have this pop culture view of the world. But Solomon looks at the world and he says, that's not how it works. And he says, I'll put up the scripture and you can see the places we highlight there. He says in verse 16, even in the place of justice, there was wickedness. What does he mean? In the places there was supposed to be good, the judge system, the court, the police, the religious leaders, even in those places where good is supposed to happen, I see wickedness. Even in places where there's supposed to be righteousness, I see evil taking place. The world doesn't work where if you do good sometimes you do good and bad things happen to you. And sometimes you're bad and you prosper and good things happen to you. Even when we expect there to be good and right, we often see the opposite. We kind of feel this, maybe I'm alone, but I don't think I am. We kind of feel this in politics right now, right? If you look at the unfavorable numbers of both candidates, they're higher than they've ever been. And we see this in politics, right? We see the place where people should be caring for and protecting the most powerless and those who are most in need. Oftentimes we see corruption on both sides of the aisle. We're taught politicians should be the best of us, right? They should be the ones who can inspire us and lead us forward to do better and unite us together when we are divided. But so oftentimes we see the opposite. We see corruption, we see division, we see fear taught more than bringing us together and helping us. And if you've seen the movie Spotlight from last year, you know the horrible realities that it depicts above of the Roman Catholic Church in the Boston area, then you know even sometimes, you may have own stories from your own life as well, even in religious places where there should be the most protection, especially of children and those who are most powerless, we see corruption, fraud, and wickedness. That's what Solomon is expressing. So the author then Solomon tries to comfort himself with the thought of, but God is just and he will judge and do right. But then he observes, but when I look at the world, we're just like, you see this in verse 19, what happens to people, children of man, is the same thing that happens to animals. Our fate is often no better than animals. I was watching our new son, who many of you know, Zane, is we just adopted 2 months ago from China. And sometimes he cries a lot, like a lot of toddlers. But he likes animal shows, right? So he likes nature shows, and it distracts him for 15 minutes before the next crying fit or whatever it might be. We were watching one of the nature shows, and sometimes people say, look, we can see in nature animals are kind and loving, and they treat one another well. And I was watching, they were talking about Bengal tigers, and he does this whoa when he sees them, which is really cute. But they were talking about the alpha male Bengal tiger on average kills 3 out of 5 baby tigers from every tiger within its own sphere of influence and rule. And they said, why does he do this? Because he's ensuring his reign will continue as the alpha tiger throughout. And I just laughed because I remember I've seen people talk about and you can see ethics in nature, and I go, that tiger is not being nice. He's killing baby tigers to ensure his own rule. And Solomon looks at things like that in nature and he goes, that's what it's like for us sometimes. People in power abusing their power, even to murder at times. We look like we're just animals and nothing better happens to us. It continues in chapter 4. He says, I saw all the oppressors that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. Essentially, the people doing wrong, the oppressors, seem to be prospering. And those who are oppressed, they have no one to comfort them. Again, we were raised to believe people in power are to do good and to protect and to serve and do good and just things. We've, in a new way, no matter what your view on some of the recent videos and things that have happened to people of color and some of the awful situations that we've seen in a lot of different videos, for the first time, a lot of people are going, maybe, if you're like me, I've had an experience going, maybe the assumptions I've made about those in power are not actually as true as I thought they were. Maybe there's more injustice than I really realize is going on and what I've taught to believe. And a lot of people of color are saying for the first time, this is what we experience on a regular basis. The author finally says, when he considers those who are oppressed suffer and that oppressors prosper, he says one of the most bleak things in the entire book. He says, look, it's not even better if you've died and moved on. That is better. What the best thing is if you've never lived in the first place. See that at the end. Verse 3, it's better than both he who has not yet been been and has not seen the evil. The best thing for anyone is that they never see any of it. Very bleak when he considers injustice on the world. So, what do we do? DJ, please give me some hope. Here, maybe you are saying. As I'm reflecting on this myself this week, I go, this is really bleak, but this is reality in the world at times. So what do we do when everything feels meaningless? What do we do? When it feels like nothing is improving or getting better or changing? When it seems justice is nowhere to be found? When it seems like the places that should be just, the people that should be doing good, the people that are in power are doing wrong, what do we do? What do we do when it feels like our fate is no better than an animal or a gnat flying around outside? What do we do when everything under the sun seems to go wrong? Well, the answer sometimes can come from strange places. This is atheist philosopher, 20th century atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell. Here's what he says. The center of me is always and eternally a terrible pain, a curious, wild pain, a searching for something beyond what the world contains. Something transfigured and infant, the beatific vision, God. I do not find it. I do not think it is to be found, but the love of my life, it is the love of my life. It's like passionate love for a ghost. At times it fills me with rage, and at times with wild despair. It is a source of gentleness and cruelty and work. It fills every passion that I have. It is the actual spring of life within me. It's incredible coming from an atheist philosopher, right? Russell essentially says the answer to all of life and what drives him crazy when he thinks about where actual meaning in life comes from, the only thing that can actually make sense of love and passion and the yearning that's inside of us as people, the only answer, ultimate answer, is God and only God. Russell, as an atheist, of course, he says he doesn't believe it. He rejects it out of hand, but it almost drives him crazy in this quote we see. But Russell may or may not know, he's pointing to the ultimate truth and the ultimate answer to what he is feeling. And the answer for Solomon, the answer for our author in Ecclesiastes, is foreshadowed, like I said before, in that phrase he uses again and again, under the sun, meaning on the earth, the material stuff, what we see before us. The answer to what we do cannot be found under the sun. He comes to the same conclusion as Bertrand Russell. So he considers the same things that Russell did and pondered all those realities of injustice and his lament, and his final conclusion of the book is that all is not ultimately lost. This is how he concludes the book in chapter 12, verses 11 through 14, and I'll read just the last two verses. He says, "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil." There is a God, Solomon says, and ultimately, he's the one that brings true meaning to our life. He is our only ultimate hope for justice and truth to triumph. And if you fear him and if you keep his commandments, it will work out. This is our whole duty. This is what will make it right in the end for you and for me. But of course, Solomon knew that, and he still penned this book. He still experienced what is going on in this book and all these questions that we have. There is one other major time, at least, in the Bible, where the most prominent people of God were wondering those same questions that Solomon did. The 12 disciples of Jesus, indeed all the followers of Jesus after he had died, were wondering all of those things after they'd seen Jesus crucified. Jesus did 3 years of incredible teaching, the very words of God coming from his lips. He did tons of miracles. He healed people of every kind of illness and disease, casting out demons, showing power over nature, healing everything that came before him. All the hopes of him being the Messiah, the one who would free the people of God. All the hopes that he would be the one finally who would be the king who would not fail. He would be the one finally that would reverse the curse way back to Adam and Eve. He would be the one finally that would bring in healing among all the nations of every ethnicity and all the strife and the war. He would be the one finally to bring forgiveness for us. All that hope gone when he died. And they're left going, what do we do now? It was all meaningless. He's dead. Everything is meaningless. This is what was going on with Matthew, with James, with John, and with Peter in their minds. And the religious leaders were the ones that killed him. The oppressors who were supposed to do good, the religious people who were supposed to do good, they killed him. The Romans who were supposed to keep the peace killed an innocent man. Everything is hopeless and meaningless. And then something changed everything for them. Something so powerful happened that God became so incredibly real to them that all the meaninglessness that they were feeling vanished and was gone. And it changed history forever. Something in history so powerfully happened before their very eyes that they saw themselves, that it not only changed their own outlook on their own lives, but it changed all history for all mankind, for them and from that moment on. And it changed the whole purpose of what they saw their life being about. So what was that one thing that changed everything for them? It was the resurrection from the dead of Jesus Christ. The resurrection of Jesus is where the greatest act of injustice that ever took place at the hands of oppressors was reversed to bring about the greatest justice in the world. The greatest good in all of history. The Son of God, the innocent, perfect, wisest man who ever lived, and God himself was killed unjustly so that you and I and all the nations could be brought together, could be forgiven of our sin, and could be changed. And we could be forgiven of the injustice we've taken a part in. God showed up for those disciples so powerfully in the resurrection that there was no way the disciples could conclude for their lives or the life of any follower of Jesus that it's now meaningless. In fact, if you're a follower of Jesus in here, every single moment of your life is eternally significant. And I'd argue even if you're not a follower of Jesus, it's eternally significant because every moment you walk around with the power of God inside you, if you're a follower of Jesus, you know the truth of the resurrection, the most important thing that ever happened in all of history. And you know the one that can change everything. And every single day, every person you interact with is an eternal being. They will live, every person you ever see will live forever. And so everything you ever do has meaning and purpose, from the most, seemingly benign diaper change to the most incredible message you could give in front of a huge crowd. It all has meaning if you know Jesus and you trust in him. And if you don't, you have an opportunity to know the one who can change everything. The resurrection is proof and the promise of God that all injustice will one day be judged justly. All wrongs will one day be righted. All meaninglessness one day will be shown to be meaningful. And it's the proof that Jesus is the true King of the universe and the great purpose of all of history. So when you have those questions, whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're not, when you have those questions, when the doubts of meaninglessness come in, when you feel like Solomon in those books and you look at the world and you go, what is happening? When you have those doubts, look to the resurrection. Look to Jesus rising from the dead. Look to the risen Christ when you're tempted with those doubts and with those questions, and help lead others to the greatest hope of the universe, that the risen King Jesus is God come to us, that he is God forgiving us, that he is God saving us, that he is God bringing the world together finally, God making all rights wrong finally, and one day he will come back and truly we'll see that he is the one we've longed for and needed, and he's the only one that can truly satisfy us in the end. Let me pray. Father, it's extremely hard for me to read the words of Ecclesiastes and at times go, boy, this is hard stuff. And I know there have been times where I feel like that. I know there are times when I see what's going on in the news, or when I've seen people I love suffer injustice or cancer or other horrible things, or you see what's going on in the world, and it can feel exactly like this. But something changed everything when Jesus rose from the dead. And it means that we can have true meaning in every single aspect of our lives, and that none of us are worthless. Every single one of us matter to you, no matter who we are. I pray, Lord, for anyone in here who's not put their trust in you and hoped in you, that the truth of the resurrection, that God died and then he rose again to show us that his love is real, his truth is real. He will one day conquer all injustice. God, I pray they would put their hope in you and their trust in you this day for the first time. Lord, help us when these doubts creep in, when things seem meaningless, when we see injustice triumph and oppressors have good things happen to them. Lord, help us to remember the resurrection is the truth and the proof that it won't last forever, that you're the true King, that your love is real, that everything has meaning. Help us to see and understand that, and then help us to tell that wonderful truth to every person we meet. We praise in Jesus' name. Amen.